Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates. Perhaps the first piece of good news in 2020 has come from the early stage of the Oxford vaccine trial being partnered by the Serum Institute here in India. We do have the first results, and it shows that initially, at least, the vaccine is safe and is creating what's being called robust immunity in those who have signed up to be part of the trial. Now, as we said, joining hands with the Oxford University and this vaccine trial, as well as with pharma company AstraZeneca, is India's Serum Institute, and Adar Poonawalla, who heads the institute, joins us now. This must come as music to your ears till you are trained to not celebrate too early, but we're going to allow you a few minutes of feeling good. What is it that is most important in the early results from the trial?
Okay, so the main takeaways, Barkha, is that it's safe. There were only mild side effects, so that's always a good sign. Fever, headaches, which can be, treated with paracetamol and just some rest. No serious side effects, so that's always very important as the first milestone any vaccine or drug has to cross. So, that's been done pretty well, because if you look at CanSino, Moderna, all the other candidates, they've only done a trial in 40 to 60 patients, right? This is a 1,000 patient study. So when you compare the table, early first wave of vaccine trials, we've done it in a large number, and that's turned out to be largely quite good. In terms of the early immunogenicity data, that's also turned out to be quite good for 90% of the patients, and only 10% I think needed the second dose, which most vaccines need at least 2 doses to give you a proper long-lasting immunity protection. So, and the third point is the T cell response. After 2-3 weeks, they found that the T cell response, which is your memory, long-term ability response for your body to be able to protect and produce an immune response and antibodies when you're attacked later on, or exposed rather to the virus, that response was also very good. In fact, better than some of the Chinese candidates. So these are all very good signs. The only thing it doesn't conclude, just so that everyone knows, is that whether it really protects you 100% against COVID-19 or not. That will become evident in 2-3 months when the phase 3 study is over in the UK and in India.
Now, all this sounds very promising, and you had in fact taken a gamble on moving into manufacturing and production stage even before the trial had reached this point. For you, you've been talking now about an August deadline. What is this August deadline? Because we're already almost at the end of July.
Yeah, so we're on track. We've made batches, at a small scale to know if it works, and it's identical to the one in the UK. That's great. That's going on well. We're submitting within the next 48 hours our proposal to start the phase 2/3 study for licensure to the Drug Controller of India at CDSCO. And, in 2 weeks, they should give us that permission, or whatever other permissions that they want us to do, or any other trials to do, to establish this. And, I think 2 weeks after that, we should get into patients. Now, the manufacturing also will simultaneously start in August, as I originally forecasted. So come October, November, when the trial results come out, we'll have hundreds of millions of doses to give our Indians, in the first quarter of 2021. So that's the plan.
And because I know you to have always struck a note of sort of somberness in this whole conversation over the last few months, what would be your health warning? Because this is not the complete trial, right? We've had experiences with other vaccines, the HIV vaccine being the most notable among them, where the first couple of phases have given very promising results and the vaccine has just fallen short in the final phase. So what would be your health warning, Adar, even as this is good news and God knows we all desperately need some, what would you still like people to be careful about before we celebrate?
So I think even as we wait for the phase 3 trial to be completed, even after that, when the vaccine is licensed, we don't know for how long it's going to protect us. We don't know if it's going to be a 2-dose or a 1-dose vaccine, but most probably it is going to be a 2-dose vaccine if we want the level of protection that we want to give everyone. And I think, typically that's why it's been 3 to 5 years before anyone says that a vaccine is really working or not, because you need to you can't rush that part of the science. You need that time to pass to
Yeah.
really know if that drug or vaccine is working. Now, the beauty with drugs or advantage with that is that you treat someone and they get cured and you can see that, in a few days. Whereas a vaccine, how do you know until you expose that human being to the virus, and unless you do a challenge trial? And there is talk right now in the UK of doing a challenge study. Now that, without beyond reasonable doubt rather, would prove to you that you vaccinate someone and then you expose them to the virus and they're fine, then it's really working 100%. Now, traditionally, challenge studies have got their ethics issues, and we're not allowed to do that in India, and even in the UK, they're seeing whether they can do it. But these would be the kind of signs that we need to wait and look out for before we know that it'll work.
So let's simplify this. Let's simplify this for people who don't understand vaccines. At the moment, the trial has been conducted on perfectly healthy people who have had no prior exposure to COVID-19. And the health warning that you're giving is that, therefore, we do not know 100% at this moment what happens when they're actually exposed to the virus.
Correct. So it's proven that the vaccine will not cause you harm.
Yeah.
And it's proven that there is an immune response coming from your body, but we just don't know if that immune response is enough to beat the disease. So these are the facts that we know. Look, I mean, if there are other vaccine candidates who don't even have an immune response, which we call in neutralizing antibodies and other things, which means we know for a fact that those vaccines will not work because they don't have any immune response that they're getting out of your body. So this is all that we know right now.
So, Adar, I have in front of me, and we're flashing it on our screen as well, the image of what you're calling Covishield. And like I said, the Serum Institute has joined hands with AstraZeneca and the Oxford Institute. Now, you have a name for this vaccine. You are moving it into production. What is the gamble that you're personally taking or on behalf of the Institute at this point that people should understand? Because people look at pharma, people look at vaccine makers and they think, oh, those profiteers. And you've spoken earlier about how you're actually pricing this in a way that you're almost doing this at cost?
Yes. So, apart from dedicating a facility, two facilities, and investing more than $200 million, which is a huge amount for us, in the OPEX and the raw materials that we now need to buy, which we've already bought now to start production, the manpower costs, the energy costs, and all that, we've estimated by December we'll have been in probably just over $200 million, including certain other equipments, to be able to produce this vaccine, to make at least 200-300 million doses. So, or more, a little bit more than that. So that's the bet and gamble that we're taking. Now, if the trials fail, we'll have lost this money, including the opportunity loss of the products that we had planned this year to make in this facility. So it's a huge gamble that we're taking, and it's a personal gamble. This is not investors' money or a listed company. So it's our own commitment, if you will, to the country and to the disease that we're trying to fight.
So you're going to price, let's say this all goes well, you're going to price Covishield at what? At $1,000, and you're hoping to make what? 1 billion vaccines by the end of the year?
It'll be less than that. It'll be probably a bit less than that. And when we go into larger volumes, it'll come down even more substantially. But as I said earlier, Barkha, I don't think any citizen of India is ever going to have to pay for it, because we're going to give it to the government and they're going to distribute it free like they do most vaccines. Because this is national security, and I'm sure the government, which have already been knocking on our door, कि भाई कब आने वाला है? I said कि आप आपके regulator को पूछो, वो आपको idea देंगे कि वो जब हमें इजाजत देंगे तो हम करेंगे. So we are doing it as fast as we can. And I don't think any citizen of any country is going to be paying for a COVID vaccine unless it goes into the private market, after 2-3 years, like a flu shot or a pneumonia shot. So that'll be a very small market, which could be priced at a higher price. But again, talking about price, since you raised it, just to put it in perspective, today, a normal COVID test is 2,500 rupees. The remdesivir and other treatments are going into tens of thousands of rupees.
Yeah.
So 1,000 rupees or less for something that gives you protection for a couple of years at least, if not longer, is, I think, a very reasonable starting point. But again, that's not what we're going to ultimately price it at. It'll be a bit less than that, and no citizen is going to pay for it. You're going to have insurance companies also covering it, and the government of India is going to be probably taking all of that to distribute it as it sees fit.
So tell me this: you're hoping to produce? What's your target? 1 billion of these by the end of the year, if this goes well?
1 billion doses would be the capacity of the new company that we're building called Covishield.
Yes.
And it's a subsidiary of Serum Institute, which we may raise capital in also and bring in investors because it's a huge investment. In the meanwhile, we're dedicating 2 of our facilities in Serum, which will give about 700 to 800 million doses.
Okay.
Interim, whilst this new facility is being built. So 700 to 800 million doses will be our capacity on an annual basis. So given the next 4 months, we're targeting at least 300 million we should be able to make by December.
Now, you're going to move this into production before waiting for the phase 3 trials to get over?
So we're planning to...
That's a huge risk.
But, well, what choice do we have? We have a choice that we do nothing for 3 months or 4 months, which is how long it's going to take to finish the Indian licensure trial.
Yeah.
And then we have nothing, and then we have to wait another 5 months for the vaccine, because if you start from scratch, it takes that much time to finish your in-house testing and Kasauli testing and Delhi release and all that. So, we have no choice but to commit to make this product, take this bet. And I'm not doing it for all my other 5 candidates, Covovax and all those other vaccines. I'm only doing it for Covishield, which is the AstraZeneca Oxford product right now. And the others we'll really have to wait and see, because I can't spend 200 million on each candidate. I'll bankrupt myself. So,
But I was going to ask you, because you mentioned the regulator. So we have this odd situation where on the one hand, you need the regulator to move ASAP. On the other hand, you had this slightly odd, peculiar letter that the government was then forced to clarify, which was speaking about a vaccine being out by August 15th. And, you and others sort of came into that debate and said, listen, no vaccine can be produced in 6 weeks. So we have this kind of odd spectrum of responses. The government then clarified that it was just meant to speed up the process and it wasn't meant to be taken literally. Now, where does your sort of situation with the regulator at this point stand? Is the regulator moving slower than you'd like the regulator to move?
Oh, no. They're working at full speed. There's never been action so fast. We're getting responses and support very quickly. In fact, the health experts were concerned that it shouldn't be too quick. We shouldn't be overlooking certain things. And to your point of, that company and ICMR never intended to circumvent any rules. Everyone has come out very clearly to say we will go through all the phases of trials and testing in animals and human beings. And only when a vaccine is safe, we give it to our countrymen. Because, if someone rushed something to the market, they'd be held to pay if things go wrong. And then there'd be an investigation on why this was allowed and who did this and how could you do this. So that will not happen in India, and thank God for that, because the world is watching India being the vaccine leaders, and we shouldn't come off looking like some other countries where they just don't look at anything and do things politically, and those policies drive science instead of the other way around. So I think now all that is settled. Everyone now is going to be very cautious before they make any statements, forward-looking statements. So that doesn't happen.
Where does this reconcile with other vaccine trials that are taking place in India? You mentioned one where the ICMR had to clarify that there was no way that a vaccine could be produced in 6 weeks. You have the Covaxin trials, the human trials, about to start at the All India Medical Institute. The director made that announcement in the last 24 hours. So where does that fit in? Do you see all of these as competitive projects? Is there a point at which all of you intersect? What happens?
Barkha, all of us are hoping that every vaccine succeeds, because that is the real chance that humanity needs and wants. We're not racing against each other. In fact, we all want to take our time and get the best vaccine for our country and the world. So I think Dr. Ella said, and you can ask him, that he hopes to launch the vaccine early next year. That was in one of the news articles. But you should check. I don't want to comment on another company. And all these other companies, you've got Zydus, you've got Biological Evans, you've got so many others in India claiming to also, make the vaccine. So you're going to see a second and third wave of vaccines being licensed, or at least going through the phases of trials, in 2021 and 2022. And my best guess and bet is a bunch of these vaccines get licensed. Then the health experts get into deciding which one is the best and gives the best protection and what is the safest. And then those vaccines will continue to become the future in routine immunization and scaling up beyond that to give to the globe and to the rest of India. So the initial vaccines will really have to be looked at. Okay, is it really safe and protecting you? Because again, as I said, time needs to pass before you can establish that. Of course, initially there's going to be a rush to roll out any vaccine that's licensed by the regulator, but then we'll have to choose which vaccine really continues after we get to see data. Every 2 months or 3 months, you get more data from people that you vaccinated, how well they're doing, whether they've been exposed, they've got the disease. So all that will play a role going forward, in the next 2 years.
So here's my question. What do you see as India's role in the global market? And I ask you this because I was reading a Politico profile of you, and Politico describes Adar Poonawalla as the most important man in the global vaccine chase who is not working in a laboratory. And it speaks of how, you're saying, why can't India actually provide this vaccine, if all goes well, to America, where America actually might be paying much more than it needs to for it?
So, it's a very good question. I think, firstly, a lot of important players are there who are going to make a difference. It's not just us, but we are definitely one of the largest players who have made a lot of partnerships. So we're very well poised and will probably be playing a major role. I think that's what the article was saying, one way or another, whether it's with this vaccine or another, simply because of our capacities and ability to produce. But coming to the US, today, BARDA is only, and you know what BARDA is, it's the US government arm which is spending billions of dollars on companies, including AstraZeneca, Novavax, and so many, and Moderna, where they've given a lot of funding for vaccines that are only produced in the US. So even we're going to apply to BARDA, maybe they make an exception for us, maybe they don't. But right now, their strategy is, unless you make in the US, like we have Make in India, we're not going to give you the funding. And as a result, they're narrowing the scope and field of view, and they're discounting companies like Serum and many others who could have a chance in contributing to supplying to the US, not only with an effective vaccine, but at a fraction of the cost. So they need to relook at that policy, and that was the intent of that article, which sort of articulated that point, that the US strategy is a bit flawed in the sense that they're only looking within the US and not looking outward. And that's dangerous, because if you don't protect the rest of the world also, forget getting easy accessible vaccines to your own country, which are affordable, but you are then risking your own population, both in commerce and in health, because other parts of the world don't start because they're not protected. They're still shut down. People are panicking. They're not wanting to come to work. And or you have US citizens traveling to those countries and back and forth. So you're not addressing the health risk and the business and commerce risk, trading risk, which will continue unless you vaccinate the whole world. So US's strategy has to be more global and not just US centric.
So you're basically saying the Americans are being too protectionist about a vaccine, in a pandemic that the world is actually hit by, and that as Indians, you would like the opportunity to produce and sell the vaccine for less than what America might have to end up paying for it.
And give them a chance, because see, there's nothing to say that the investments they've made will succeed. They've invested 4 major companies. But that means you've discounted all Indian, Chinese, and so many other candidates that could happen. Now, China is a separate issue, but if you leave China out of it, so many other opportunities that the US is missing on.
So let me ask you in the end, what is your assessment of where we stand today against the battle of the virus itself? We're at 1.1 million. Many people believe that number could be much higher because we have no serological survey out in the public domain yet. So we don't actually have a sense of how many people have been infected and have just moved on without even maybe knowing it. there are regional lockdowns taking place. Pune, where you are right now, has suddenly erupted, has suddenly surged, right? You've never been a big fan of the lockdown, nor have I. Where do you think we stand today in this battle?
So if you remember, one of the first interviews we had done, I had forecasted to the government, please do not have repeated lockdowns. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember.
That is exactly what has happened here, like in Pune. And that is the worst thing you can do. You have prevented the peak of the virus instead of it getting a certain level of infection. And then that would over time give partial herd immunity, not full herd immunity. By reducing transmission. Now everyone has said that. And realistically, to answer your question, probably 30 to 40, maybe 50 million people in India have COVID. And I tell you on what basis I come to that statistic. You know, today 9% of everyone who's being tested in cities is positive. Is that an accurate statement?
I think so.
So if you 9%, roughly, or even less to be conservative, 6% of the entire population in all cities of India, what does that figure tell you? Probably 30, 40 million people?
Well, those getting tested, right? We don't know. There's so many people just not getting tested.
If everyone who's getting tested today...
I know you're extrapolating. I know.
See, we've tested 12, 13 million people in India. About 1 odd million have come positive.
So the percentage is about 10%.
So you extrapolate, no? So you say 9 to 10% of everyone in every city, more or less, is infected. Then you discount it even by 50%. So you're coming to a figure of at least 30, 40 million people who probably have it. Now, as that increases and will increase over the next few months, I do believe that some sort of partial herd immunity will build up in the sense that transmission should reduce. Now, why am I saying that? Because I've seen that in the UK, where we're trying to do a trial and we're seeing the rates going down, and Europe, where they never had these very big, huge lockdowns. I mean, they were locked down, but you've seen that after a certain level in a population of disease, this disease is reducing its transmission. So I'm only going by those facts and those observations that maybe that will happen in India also, but we need to allow India to reach that level. We keep having lockdowns and stopping that, disrupting people's livelihoods, and that's not helping. And another thing, this myth that we're running short of beds and other things, we are hospitalizing people who don't need the hospital. I've talked to all my hospital owner friends, and they're saying 50% of the people occupying the beds don't need it. They're just sitting over there like that and just eating over there. And they're depriving others who
really need it
for other things. So you see what you're doing by isolating them in hospitals is very wrong. Unless you need a ventilator, oxygen, and these other treatments, you should be diagnosed and then sent for either home quarantine or these other provisions, like these municipalities have made in these other beds where you get a symptomatic treatment, and you free up the beds in the hospitals. Today, clinical trials for new drugs have stopped. Treatment for medical patients has stopped. You can't get admitted. So that's causing a huge disruption in the medical area.
I've met so many families, where people have died from tuberculosis, cancer, kidney disease because they just can't get treatment. Okay, finally, we've done a bunch of interviews, and based on available science, you've shifted naturally when you think a vaccine might be ready, right? Now, I know you're in full production mode, going by the good news out of the Oxford vaccine trial. If you had to put a date and say, by this time, I think we'll have a vaccine, what would that date be today?
November/December in terms of being licensed if the trial succeeds. So there's a certain amount of time for the permissions for the trial, certain amount of time for the trial to be completed. And if the trials are positive, the results are positive, November/December is my deadline, or rather optimistic, I would say realistic, not optimistic, realistic chance of licensure.
All right, Adar Poonawalla. God knows, as I said in the beginning, we've needed something to move. At least something has moved. You're taking a big risk. I know how hard your team's been working on it. So congratulations on the first piece of good news, and all the best from all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barkha.
Thank you.